And we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Deal Champs podcast. Our mission at Deal Champs is to empower and inspire the listeners by highlighting real life deals from real people across the nation. We also like to do interviews like one today with our special guest, Alex Ottewell. And we aim to provide valuable insights and actionable tips to help you guys with your business and your financial goals. So today, we've got an exciting episode. I can't wait to dive in. We've got all our hosts here. We've got Mr. Strat Daddy himself. We've got Mr. Jason Pritchard, and we got our special guest, Mr. Alex Ottewell. Strat, why don't you give a little quick introduction on yourself?
Real quick, thank you, Captain America. Thank you so much for having us here on your platform and letting us be a part of this beautiful country. My name is Stratton Brown. I'm a real estate investor out of Fresno, California. We own a virtual assistant company. We own a couple self-storage facilities, and then I primarily buy, if it's in the single-family space, sub-2 deals. My goal is, again, real estate has changed my life in a meaningful way, given me opportunities when I had absolutely zero life skills, couldn't make money for shit, had absolutely nothing going for me, and I happened to stumble upon it. And then I worked for another guy, and that absolutely changed my life. And now here I am.
All right. And then we got, as Stratton likes to say, the captain of, or the master of hair, Mr. Jason Pritchard, looking fresh today, ready for our
The Jimmy Johnson of real estate. Jimmy Johnson of real estate.
Hair is out today, boys. Alex has got a slick do too, man. So I think we've got some competition today, dude. His hair's
got a fresh look.
I'm losing mine.
The beard, the line on the beard is looking extra crispy
that
too.
Line
and
is
when you see it in person
bro.
too, it is fresh.
Yeah,
it's crispy,
it
right?
good, bro.
Yeah.
So, anyways, guys, my name is Jason Pritchard. I am your other co-host. Backstory on me was I was in corporate America for 15 years. I burned all the boats in 2014. Went full time in real estate. Since then, we have flipped and wholesaled close to 400 properties. We own about 100 rental properties here in the Central California area. And like Stratton said, our goal with this podcast, my personal goal, is to try to transfer as many of the skills and the things that we've learned over the last 9 or 10 years to you guys. Real estate has changed our life, and we are really, really excited to have Alex on the podcast today to talk about some of the cool things that he is doing in his business now.
Cool.
All right, awesome.
Is it my turn, Dean?
You're up next, man. Tell us about you.
All right, let's go. So moved to the U.S. in 2000 from England. Was born there. My parents emigrated to the U.S., chasing that American dream. Around 2009, graduated high school, got out, went to boat mechanic school, decided to get into real estate because I suck as a boat mechanic. I ended up stumbling into tax deed auctions. So that's how my career started. Probably did close to 7 years there in the tax deed space. Then I pivoted to sell direct marketing. Got into the cold calling. That's actually how I started MGI Phone Services, which was a Philippines-based call center. I built that up to about 250 callers at its peak. And during that time, I did over 1,000 flips, actual flips, not Instagram flips. So we bought and sold a bunch of garbage trailers. That is literally how I got the nickname King of Trailers, because I found an asset class that during 2011 to 2018, nobody paid attention to it. So I went after those mainly, and I bought a ton of them. I said we did over 1,000 assets, nothing fancy. I kind of kept it to below the median on everything I did, try to really focus in on people that needed affordable housing, but also I provided a service, because if it was a reasonably priced acquisition, I would sell it on a note, and that created passive income for me. So we did a couple hundred of those too. Venturing forward, got tired of fix and flip. Woke up one day, I had 25 flips going at the same time, and I said I quit. Don't want to do it anymore. That was July of last year. And then I got into JV wholesaling for a bit, built that company up very quickly, sold that. Didn't make a ton of money or anything, but it was just kind of a little speed bump into my progression. End of December, learned about oil and gas. And then January, I left real estate completely and went full blown into oil and gas. So I own a petroleum company based out of Texas now.
One World.
One World Petroleum. Right here. There you go. So lot to dig into, but that's a quick synopsis.
What part of the supply chain are you in the oil and gas space?
We're upstream. So we extract oil. We deal with the well side.
So Mr. Alex also got dubbed the nickname Mayor of Tampa.
We're not getting into that.
We'll maybe come back to that later. But
that was a poor spending.
But guys, make sure if you're listening to this, you're listening to the Deal Champs podcast on YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you guys are listening to us on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We definitely appreciate that very much. So why I love diving into stories like this is you quit your own business. Like you woke up one day and you quit your own business and essentially pivoted. I want to talk about your real estate career first, because there's honestly so much in there that is pretty crazy, like wildly successful. We just saw each other at an event and you were talking some net numbers that you were doing. For someone to walk away from millions of dollars net in a year is pretty wild. So talk to us about your business. Like what made you successful in real estate? Did you just you mentioned like several different niches that you kind of did. What allowed you to be successful?
So a lot of it was adapting to the market, right? So I'll kind of frame it out year by year. So 2011 to 2015, this is before we started seeing actual traction on the market. So I was getting in, I was going to the tax deed sales. I was buying, quarter acre lots with a single wide mobile home on it, 10, 15, 20 grand. I mean, at that time, I'm in the Tampa Bay market, and I ended up doing probably 150-mile radius of my home by the end of the career. But at that time, I was just basically going to the auctions and picking up what I could. I didn't have the capital. This is pre-hard money. Hard money was not prevalent in 2011, 12, 13. I'd probably say 14, it started really kind of coming back a little bit more. So if you can imagine, I was taking small chunks of cash and basically recycling them. I was going to the auction, pick up a handful of properties. We'd trash out, we paint them, we throw them on Craigslist at the time. Craigslist was a huge platform for selling cheap assets. You have to think of it too. A lot of people get really tied up in the idea of their ideal home. And when I was doing real estate, what I try to focus on is affordable housing is more based around just having a place they can call their own. So if you fix that problem at the lowest cost possible, you have a large buyer pool. There's a lot of people that just want to own something. And the same thing applied to when I was doing the seller financing. My goal wasn't to necessarily, make tons more on the financing. My goal was to be able to take a home that was cheap and get somebody into it. And how could I do that when there was no bank financing for it? Well, I became the financier. It was a lot of quick trading initially. 2014, that was when we broke 100 deals. That was, pretty cool thing. I was running around like crazy, but we went over 100 deals. I had no systems, no processes back then. I was literally just running it off of a Word document. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. But it was more based around the fact it was a very transactional thing. I wasn't making tons of money on these early flips. I was just going in for 10, 15 grand and making 10, 15 grand back, maybe profit wise. And I would just keep stacking the cash and putting it back into the market. Now, around 2015, the market kind of changed a little bit. So we started seeing the uptick starting to happen. And that's when auctions started getting a little worse. If you've never been in the tax deed space, it's more based around people not paying their taxes, but also there wasn't really a lot of people coming back and redeeming it. So you start off the month with a giant list. Maybe it's 100 properties. And this is Florida law, like how Florida works. Every state's different. There's different redemption periods and things like that. But in Florida, once it's paid, like once I bought it at the auction, I paid it, it's mine. Now there's a cloud on the title you have to get rid of, but we used a couple of different third-party services for that. But in general, it's yours at that point.
They can't redeem it ever. Like they can't ever come back. Like I know in Indiana,
the only way they
you
can
have
come
like
back
18
in
months.
Florida is bankruptcy. If they filed a bankruptcy prior to the sale, I'd lost one from that, which was good anyway, because that was in a very dangerous neighborhood that I wasn't aware of. The cops wouldn't come there. Let's put the level of danger it was. The cops said they would not come down that road after 5 p.m. So, you know, me as me, I was like, it's okay. But it happened to be a bankruptcy deal where they had filed the day before the auction and it went back to them. I got my money back and that was fine. But no, in Florida, it's pretty locked solid. You know, unless they failed to do the publications, because they have to do 4 weeks of publications and file to the correct people. I mean, there's judges that would come back, but you have to think about it. If a guy's losing a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 mobile home, they're probably not equipped with great legal counsel. They probably don't have the capital to go pursue that kind of merit. So a lot of the deals were getting pushed through, auctioned, and they're not going to really have anything to come back on. You know, if they couldn't afford a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 tax bill, they're probably not paying a $250 an hour attorney. This is sad truth, but it's true. So 2015, 2016, 2017 kind of got more difficult with the auctions. I had to go wider. So originally I was doing 4 or 5 counties. Then I was up to like 13. We kept expanding because I wanted to get into those cheaper assets because I had limited capital. I was using private money. I didn't want to spread myself too thin. So I kept going wider and more rural, like out in the middle of nowhere. Well, 2017 time, one of my favorite auctions went online. And the problem when they were going online was it opens up the bidders to everywhere. When it was a live auction, you had to come in, you had to bring your 5%, put it down, and you would, in essence, be limited to whoever's in the room. Once they put it online, then you started seeing Korean buyers, Chinese buyers, Japanese buyers, everybody else started coming in. So that, in essence, squeezed my amount of properties I could purchase.
Yeah.
So 2018 is when I got into cold calling, and it was purely based off the fact that I was like, hey, the auction game is not going to last forever. I need to pivot. This is what I talk about all the time with pivoting. You got to pivot fast and see where the waves are going. When I pivoted into cold calling, I ended up being really good at it. We started generating 2,000 interested leads a month, which I thought was normal, and turns out it wasn't.
That's
I was like,
it's not.
Yeah, that's bananas,
I was
bro.
like, I guess I can write a good bullshit cold call script. I mean, that literally what I was like, okay, cool. Well, at the time, that's how it rolled into the call center stuff. So at the time, there was a kid that I was paying in the Philippines, young guy, like 19, 20, and he had his little VA business. And I was paying him, and he was talking to me. He's like, Alex, nobody has the volume of leads that you're doing. How are you doing it? And I'm like, well, I think maybe script, this, that. He's like, would you be interested in helping me build up my my VA business? Because, I've only got, I think he had like 25 or 30 callers. And I was like, yeah, sure. But if I'm going to do that, I want you to follow my processes. If I'm bringing on clients and everything else, we're going to do exactly what I do. And, it'll be branded under my thing. And you can handle the day-to-day as long as you're following my, SOPs, my KPI reporting and how I want it done. We'll do that. And he said, okay, cool. And then that's when we built it up pretty quick. So, we did over 100 callers and 120 days onboarded from opening. And then it just kept escalating from there. It started around 2020 and, it just built up. It grew really quick because it was word of mouth. I went and got Kevin Harrington to be kind of a spokesperson for it because he was in my network. So he was interested in buying some ownership into it, which is now his business model fully. But back then he was just starting it. And he's like, hey, I want to buy into it. I'd be interested. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's shoot this video and see how it goes. Well, we shot the video and I got a really good response. I'm like, actually, I don't think I want to sell any of it. So I didn't. But I do appreciate that, Kevin. That was great. He gave me a nice little kickstart with the video. I mean, I paid him for the video, but in general, I mean, their reason for doing these videos is to get you to sell. You know, like Shark Tank. You go in, they use their face, their brand, everything else. But I just ended up just paying for the video and splitting. So let's go.
Alex, question for you. I want to talk about the tax deed stuff. Can you give the people that are tuned in just an idea about some of the numbers, right? Like what was the typical acquisitions cost on something like this? Then are you getting the people out, remodeling it and flipping it? I heard you say at the beginning, you're doing some creative stuff where you're wrapping notes and then turning and selling them on maybe like owner finance, right? So what was kind of the exit strategy and the numbers that you guys were working with on those deals back then?
Yeah. Well, to start, I never did wraps. Everything we bought and everything we financed was purely cash purchased with my own cash. You had investment capital, but what I would do is the investment capital would go into the active purchases, and then the holds I would use my own cash in. And what would typically my standard structure was very simple. If I would buy a $20,000 single wide on a quarter acre, and let's say I could sell it tomorrow on Craigslist for 40 grand, right? Just cash sale as is, do nothing to it. I would typically put it out at like 55 or 60, which was still below ARV at the time. You know, if we had fixed it up and made it pretty. But I put it out like 50, 55. I wasn't really price gouging them or anything. And then I would take half of the purchase price and make that the down payment. So 50% of whatever I was into the deal for, I would make the down payment. And then I would try and structure the note in order to get paid back within 18 to 24 months. So then that way, you know, if you think about it, when you're dealing with smaller numbers, like I was buying it for 20, so half that would be 10 grand down. Okay, that's reasonable. Well, then you take 10 grand and spread it over 24 months. I mean, what are you looking at? $500 a month, $400 a month payment? So it's not exactly a high payment with that structure. So it was more of it's diving down into what asset works for this, you know, that kind of mobile home, quarter acre, whatnot, and then making sure the metrics work. So when I bought it, if I bought it too high, let's say I paid 40 for it. Well, I knew back then, 2014, 13 stuff, mattress money wasn't 20 grand. Mattress money was probably 5 or 10 grand. So I knew I couldn't exit into that bucket. You know, my goal at the time, and unknowingly, by the way, because I didn't have a mentor or any kind of networking until 2017, 2018 time. So all of this was just kind of my own theory. But yeah, if you bought something too expensive, I couldn't do this with it. But if I bought it for like 20 grand or so, 15, something like that, that half down and then 18 to 24 months to recoup. And then typically they were anywhere between 7 and 10-year notes. I did do some 20s. I still hold them. But in general, I kind of had like that bucket. And in regards to things I was just painting, wholetailing per se, you know, anywhere between, I would say everything was under 35 grand. The highest I was selling stuff for was probably 70, 75. Most of it, honestly, was being done at the courthouse steps. So I'd buy it on a tax deed sale. We'd send in the crew, clean it, paint it, just paint the outside typically. That was actually one of our tricks. We would take all the trash out. We'd cut the grass. We'd paint the outside because it gave curb appeal. And then what it did was the type of buyer that was buying those at the time, they want that kind of vision, right? You know, a lot of people buy off what they see. So if it's all mess in the yard and mess on the outside, they were a bit more pushed back. But if the inside was the only part that looked kind of rough, they typically were able to see the vision a bit better. So I try to create the vision for the buyer with whatever we bought. And when we were selling them, you know, they were paying cash or cashier's check or something like that. So it was typically handled right there at the courthouse. I just record a deed over to them with a title search that we paid for. So,
what interest rate were you do you have on most of these things?
8%. I did a flat 8. So the neat part with seller financing, the way I was doing it, you know, they were called land installment contracts, contract for deed. You have 4 different things you can play with. You have principal, you have interest rate, you have term, and you have payment amount and down payment. I guess 5 really, but you can adjust things. So people like when you're financing these levels of properties, it's kind of like buy here, pay here. People care about how much down, how much a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really my focus. Now, at the same point, I didn't want to violate any kind of financial laws or anything by overselling people. So I always made sure that whatever the property is worth, we definitely were below that. But yeah, I mean, I would get a little bit of a premium for the fact that I was allowing them to finance, right? By adjusting the principal up, or maybe honestly, sometimes I would stretch the term, because that compounding interest, when it gets up to that 7 or 8, 9 year mark, it really adds a lot of additional interest. People don't realize it, especially like their mortgages, right? Like people go get a 30-year mortgage, but if you pay like 2 extra payments a year, it takes off 8 years off your mortgage, just off 2 payments. So, but people don't think about that. Just, hey, here's my payment, that's it. But yeah, 2 extra payments a year will take 8 years off your 30-year mortgage.
So you're mitigating a lot of your risk, because if you're buying them for 20, you're reselling them for 55, and you're getting half of that sales price down. Most of your out of pocket,
half of my purchase price down.
Yeah,
half of your purchase
purchase
price down.
Yeah.
Oh, half of your purchase price. So you have 10 down. So you still have a little bit of money in there that you're recouping through the payment. What other risk needs to be mitigated for anybody that's looking at like this type of exit strategy? Are you taking a lot of these back from the sellers just because of the price points you're dealing with, or the other red flags?
No, that would be my next point with it. So I had a bit of a qualifying process. Obviously, consult an attorney with any of this stuff and make sure you have the right legal documents, and, you're complying with, Dodd-Frank law. I mean, that's one, and there's some other things here. But
did you have an RMLO underwrite all these? Sorry.
I'd have to check with my attorney. So some stuff is, but in general, when you're dealing with repayments, defaults happen because people overstretch, right? The average person assumes that they can pay more than they can, or they want something so much they're willing to overstretch in order to get it. So when I'd have people call me and ask to finance a deal from me, they'd be like, hey, I want to buy this, I could put this down tomorrow, I could pay this payment, whatnot. I would typically ask them, I said, hey, well, how much are you used to paying a month? Like, what do you pay currently for what you're, investing in, using, whatever, living in? What do you pay a month? And they would tell me. And then I would say, kind of roughly, what do they make a month, almost at a high level? And then I would try and structure the payment to extend out enough to make that monthly payment lower than they're used to by 20, 30%. And people say to me like, hey, in a rental, you wouldn't want that, right? You wouldn't want to take that kind of hit. But when you're financing something to somebody, you're stretching the terms, you're making more interest on it, but also you're making it a safer bet for that person, because I'm identifying the fact that, hey, this is what the person currently affords. If I bring it down to here, instead of pushing it up where they say they can afford, I have a higher chance of them actually successfully paying me all the payments and paying me off. And so that's always how I kind of structured it, to make sure, for one, I was getting paid back because I still have skin in the game initially. But two, I want to do right by people. I mean, most people aren't fiscally responsible. I mean, that's the truth of it. The high school, I went through high school in this country, and they don't teach you anything about how to balance a checkbook and how to handle mortgages and payments and everything else, and credit card debt. I mean, the amount of people I speak to, 18 to 21, they literally come out of school, they get a bunch of credit cards, they rack them through the roof, and they have no idea what to do with them. And I didn't want to put somebody else in that position when they're buying a property from me, because regardless, like there's companies out there, and there's scumbags for it, that literally structured their debt to make sure that they get a repo every time, so they can keep turning it and burning it, right? And I didn't want to have that kind of business model. So I always made sure people actually knew what they were getting and how they could afford it. Is there any? Sorry, I feel like I'm going on rants. I just wanted to.
No, I got a whole list of questions for you, bro.
Yeah, we've got some engagement from some of the viewers, Alex. So when you were doing the resale on some of these products, were you putting them on MLS? I know you mentioned Craigslist. A lot of times those are FSBO transactions. How are you actually exiting from these things?
I stopped the Craigslist stuff around 2016, 2017. My later part of the career, more relevant, last year's kind of stuff, beginning of last year. If it's a deal that I want to, FHA, conventional kind of lender, if that's the type of asset I'm dealing with that needs that kind of structured financing, I'm going to put it on the MLS, and I'm going to use a flat fee. I used a company called Easy Choice MLS. They're local to my market. $99 flat fee, get it out there. Have your VA or administrator answering the calls for that. When it came to the seller financing stuff, I mean, I still do a little bit here and there. I'll put it on Facebook Marketplace because it's a different audience. You don't want to have to cut through, deal with realtors. You kind of want to go direct to the investor or direct to the homeowner. So,
got it.
Yeah.
Got some love here. Somebody said, thanks for being a positive in the world. So
Sweet.
it brought up the scumbags out there. Yeah. So definitely
Sure.
getting some love from some people out there. Yeah, that's good.
It's scary, even, not to knock too many people, but even like the lease options, right? I mean, when they give them a 2 year to cash out, you lock in your price and then 2 years of payments, then you're supposed to refi out of it. But if you know the guy is never going to be able to get the financing to buy the house, you're setting him up for failure. And it's not a great situation. So I'm not a big fan of it.
Quick shout out. Shout out Landon Horn. Go Badgers.
There you go.
All right. Our man is back. Mr. Pat Hilton says Alex Ottewell is a premier voice for success and capitalism. His blatant smearing of loser broke wannabe gurus is effective and needed in this space. This man is a voice for anyone that wants to win big. Anyone that dislikes this man supports communism and wants to witness the failure and fall of America.
That's good.
If that's not Pat.
Shout out to Pat.
I don't know.
Pat.
Yeah, no,
Shout
it's
out,
definitely Pat. Pat's profile usually shows up there. For some reason, he's got to re-up his deal with StreamYard. So for anybody who's commenting on here and you want your face shown on Facebook, go to StreamYard.com/Facebook so we can see who it is.
I got a question real quick.
Go for it.
What multiple did you sell your JV company for?
Not much. It was literally we were out for, I don't know, a month of revenue maybe. It wasn't great.
Oh, no
So
way.
I only started it in August because I needed something for my team to do, because I literally said no to fix and flip overnight. So the way that transition worked, you imagine, quite frankly, I woke up after a bad night of partying till 5 a.m. I wake up in a hotel in Houston and I'm like, fuck fix and flip. I don't want to do it anymore. Because I had a bunch of texts from problems. I was away, I was hanging out with friends and stuff. And I woke up, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I literally just quit. But when I did it, I posted it on Instagram, and my assistant at the time called me up and she's like, hey, do we have a job? I just saw you posted, we're shutting down the company. I'm like, nah, we're fine. No big deal. I ended up wrapping up those 25 flips. And then during that time, I was like, okay, I got to do another quick pivot to keep us going while I decide what I'm doing. And the easiest one was JVing nationwide with, extensive buyers lists and stuff. It made sense because I already had, if you think about it, real estate has a few widgets that overlap regardless of what space you're in. You have your cold calling, right? That creates leads. It doesn't matter where you're exiting those leads. Your fix and flip, wholesale, novation, it's all lead generation. I already had that in place. And then when it came down to buyers list, right, I'd already been selling to people for a long time. So I already had that established. So pivoting from fix and flip, where I was creating my own leads, over to nationwide JV was pretty simple because I just said, hey, audience, send me your deals. I'll sell your stuff. So we did like 150 our first month in the JV.
150 JVs?
$150,000 rev.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not 150 JVs. That'd be cool. Then I had the same issue I had with fix and flip. Like, I hired a couple of dispositions. The best one got a big ego really fast, had to let her go. Had another one, issues, lot of very high energy guy, but just couldn't close, right? So I was dealing with the same problems I was having in fix and flip. And my crews at the time, I needed to put them somewhere. So I moved them over to Dolmar Cross with Annie Zombie Flippers. He's a buddy of mine. And he was like, hey, I need to flip more houses. So can I have some crews? I'm like, sure. So I gave him all my crews. So my contractor, two of my main crews, another crew went somewhere else. But I moved them around, right? I wanted to make sure everybody had work still. I didn't want to just, because of my blatant crazy choice to quit, I didn't want to leave everybody unemployed. So that's why the JV business came in. It wasn't like a cool exit or anything like that. I was making really good money. I mean, we were averaging around 250,000 a month net. My best month was like 475, 500 grand. I mean, that was a really strong income earner. But the crazy part was I didn't enjoy it anymore. You hit a tipping point in any business where you don't enjoy it, it becomes just too systemized. Like the rehab crews were going out there doing their thing, never showed up at projects anymore. A lot of the fun parts of the business I felt I wasn't doing anymore. So I kind of hated it. It was just all the boring stuff or all the headaches I was dealing with. So that's kind of why I kind of wound it all down, and then kept it ticking along a little bit until I found the oil stuff, and I was like, okay, this is where I want to go.
Are you the one who got Nick into oil, or did Nick get you into oil?
Neither. So, well, I actually learned about oil from 8-Figure Cartel. I went to that, and someone was presenting, and I heard about it, and then because how do I answer this? So yeah, I mean, Nick's been investing in oil for quite a while now. I'd seen him do it, different projects and stuff he had been getting involved into. When I was down there, I was presenting about my seller finance stuff, and I was chatting and whatnot. And it looked like a venture I wanted to get into. How I learned about like the intricacies and the education behind it all came from attorneys I hired. So right away in January, I brought on an engineer who started teaching me kind of about the mechanical part of oil. If you can imagine, you hire an engineer, they already know about it. So I basically had him whiteboard how oil works for the first month and a half. And then I went to NAPE, which is an expo, oil and gas expo, where I met my attorneys, and I said, hey, I need to learn about the legality, more of the money side of oil and gas, because an engineer is not going to know how the title defects work, or leasing obligations, things like that. So I hired these 2 attorneys to sit on Zoom calls with me 3 times a week, pay them $200, $250 an hour, and literally sat there for an hour and a half a few times a week, and I would ask them tons of questions. And that's literally how I learned about it. I mean, most businesses, as you know, they just have different widgets, right? You have sales, you have customer service, you have accounting, you have different versions of things. But in general, I knew how business worked. So once they gave me the specifics towards oil and gas, I really had a good understanding of which direction to go in.
And is it, sorry, I don't want to be hogging all the questions, but is it like water rights, dude? Like to where you can buy the water rights of a property, or is it completely different?
So I don't actually buy any rights. So what we do, here's how oil and gas works in my part of it. I'm acquiring what's called PDP, which is proven developed producing assets. Basically, imagine Marathon, which is one of the wells that we bought. Marathon goes and drills a well. Well, initially that well gets drilled, the production comes online, and it's through the roof, right? You'll do thousands of barrels, or gas, for instance, 400,000 MCF, good numbers. Well, the first year these wells get drilled, it starts really kind of nosediving down, and then it'll kind of see a plateau, and you'll get like really good initial production, and then it'll kind of come down, and then it will start smoothing out. And by like year 3 or 4, you're kind of seeing a trend with the decline. So whenever you're buying oil and gas assets, you're really looking at the past performance of the production. So then you can forecast how the well is going to go. Well, these bigger companies will drill these wells, and then eventually they're not worth the headache to them. So they'll sell them. And that's how I go acquire them. It may not be a big company, maybe a mom and pop operator kind of thing, but I'll go buy a bundle of wells together based on a projection of what it's going to do at a multiplier that, we negotiate. And at that point, I own the well, but I also own the lease to the minerals. So in order to extract oil out of a well, you have a lease with a mineral owner or mineral owners. And that gives you the right to extract the oil out of the well. That's how it works.
What type of yields are you looking for? And then what are the multiples you're buying those things on?
Ranges. The problem with oil and gas is there's a lot of intricacies. Some people are kind of talking about it as if it's an easy game, and it's not. I'll give you some examples. So you could have really good production on a well. You could be doing, 1,000 barrels a month out of a well, but it may make excessive water. So whenever you're extracting oil out of the ground, you may get oil, you may get wet gases, but you also may get water, and that water is toxic. It's it's not safe potable water. It's nasty water. So when we're extracting that oil out, we have to get rid of the water. There's a cost to that. So you could be in, for example, the Permian Basin, which is West Texas, and that has a 15 or 20 to 1 ratio water to oil. So your cost basis of expenses could go through the roof just based on the fact you got to get rid of all that water. So I wouldn't really say that we have certain metrics we run off of. It's more of running a decline analysis. And we look at what the PV10 is, which is discounted cash flow over the course and duration of the reserves. It's kind of how a bank will ask for a reserve report whenever they're giving you a loan on oil and gas. And we kind of go off of those numbers and buy a percentage of that. That's how we do it.
Alex, I'm a complete layperson when it comes to the oil and gas business. What I'm curious about is, as a real estate investor now, I have a fairly solid understanding of how real estate works, right? What were the things about oil and gas that made you look at your fix and flip business and say, hey, we're netting $250K a month on average. We've got good money, good systems, good teams coming in. We've kind of got this on autopilot. Let me just scrap this, right? And go to a whole new venture that's brand new to me, that I need a whole new learning curve and all of that stuff. What was it about it that you really liked about it?
Yeah, like what the fuck did you see? To like, hey,
Yeah,
this is for sure a Billy.
Part of it was conversations. So I'll give you one for example. And this was after I already made the decision, but it kind of reaffirmed what I already thought. I called up my attorney one day, and he's probably close to 60 now. And I said to him, I said, I'm really trying to put some tangible goals together, right? I said, realistically, in the next 5 years, if I set a goal to have $100 million exit in oil and gas in 5 years, do you think that's achievable based on my zero knowledge? At the time, February, I was kind of just barely scraping in to 5 years from now. And he said to me, he said, well, I'll be honest with you. We've handled 25, 30 exits in oil and gas that were north of $1 billion. So that was his specialty, right? He helped companies sell for bigger things. And he said the last one I saw that stood up quick in 5 years went for 1.4 billion. And let me tell you this. He said, if you're not shooting for $1 billion in 5 years, he says, you're crazy, because the guy that sold for 1.4 billion couldn't scrape the level of knowledge you have about business systems, marketing, and integrations and stuff. So he said, if you couldn't do it in 5 years, I'd be shocked, which put a really good feeling in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when you're in real estate, shooting for $100 million exit in real estate is pretty damn solid, right? We're pretty happy. Like, everybody's like, hell yeah, that's a good exit. Oil and gas just adds a zero. And I knew from my experience in fix and flip, I wasn't going to be able to scale that to, maybe I could get up to like a $10 million a year company, but not.
And that's
not
chaos, though.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
chaos.
We were doing about 5 and netting around 3. So, that was really strong as it is. I just knew I didn't have the mental. No, that's not true. I knew I had the ability to do that. But the question is, sometimes you can put the same amount of energy into another
different vehicle
direction, and you can do it quicker and easier based on your already established knowledge. And I think I don't want to work. I love working, but I don't want to work this way forever. And I think that standing up a company like this, the way I'm doing it and how heavily we're going into it, it takes a lot of effort and brain power and stuff. And, there's that brain damage effect, right? I'm okay with the amount of brain damage I'm getting in oil and gas right now, because I know the goal is big enough to make me set for life. If you've never made millions of dollars a year, you think, oh, fuck, you're already set. But the truth is, the more you make, the more you spend. I mean, that is the truth. I mean, I've had Lamborghinis, I've had McLarens, I've had all these fun toys, and as Dean was talking about, I've tossed $20,000 in a strip club once or twice. So, in general, money goes quick. So you got to decide. And I kind of got all that out of my system. That's kind of another story, but I got all that out of my system. But really, in general, in order to have impact in this world, it really revolves around money. I mean, you can have impact on a singular level by doing good things and giving back. But one of my goals is really to, impact the masses and, put $1 billion in your bank and see how much impact you can do. Way more than I could by myself.
And are you venture backed at all, or is this your own cash? And then is this cash flow heavy, or is it more of like a tech exit to where?
No, we're burning cash like no tomorrow. I made a lot of connections. It's a balance. So asset wise, we're using private money for purchases. Operational capital, we're keeping that kind of in house. But yeah, when it comes to like the size of the deals I'm trying to target right now are anywhere between 3 and 5 million. And there's no real like bank lending going on currently. It does ebb and flow with the market, but it's easier to structure deals when you can close quickly. So I've been using private capital that I already am involved with, not private equity. Like there's no, crazy conglomerate or anything behind me, but I do have, I had a guy that I mentored 7 years ago now, and 6-7 years ago. And I kind of helped him out and talked to him and was positive with him and stuff. And he blew up really well. And he has a very substantial multi-9-figure net worth, and he happens to believe in me. So he's one of our capital backers.
How do you are you operating from a place of just pure self-confidence and like past outcomes of you doing to do stuff? Because I hear you say it's like not cash flow heavy, we're burning through cash. So like just walk through like the mental gymnastics that you're doing to just kind of brand new industry, cash is getting lit on fire, right? Like what are you going through mentally right now, dude?
Yeah, I mean, like I'll give you an example. We spent close to $1 million in operational cash since January. So we're averaging probably a $65,000 loss a month right now. But that's more based on the fact that I'm trying to build a business faster than it would organically, in the sense that if you had a general guy that was wanting to get in oil and gas, he's not going to go buy the expensive software as I am. He's not going to go market the way I am. He's not like, I'm the main sponsor of the largest oil and gas event in the country coming up in 2024. So like
you're balls to the wall.
Yeah, I'm going balls to the wall and spending a fuckload of cash during it. Excuse the language for Dean's purposes. I know he's sensitive, so. But no, we're just spending a ton of money, and it's good though, because part of my when you first got into real estate and you went in, you're like, I want to be a landlord. Wait, nope, that kind of sucks. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe not full time. I want to go fix and flip houses. It's kind of good. I want to novate. Like you go try things in the real estate space and see what hits you right? I'm doing the exact same thing in oil and gas. I've gone through a handful of different scenarios of how we can make money in oil and gas. And part of that has become an expensive education, because as you pivot into different ways of making money in the space, I've had to spend money to learn if I want to do it or not. And, even mistakes with employment. I mean, my first engineer, I let go because he made a pretty sizable mistake, and he wouldn't own up to it. So I said, hey, sorry, we gotta part ways. I mean, it wasn't a small mistake. So multi 6-figure mistake for long term. So when it comes to starting something new with no true mentor besides attorneys and stuff, and they've done it on a bigger game, I've had to kind of bring that together. There's no guy going into oil and gas brand new fresh going and spending 10 grand a month on attorney mentoring calls, right? So they didn't have that kind of niche. They were giving me turning on the faucet and just throwing it all at me. And I've had to kind of break it down and figure out where it fits for me and how it's working. So, and we've tried different marketing strategies, ways of reaching them. Part of the reason why I'm doing the Giant Expo is based on the fact that I need to reach bigger people. We've learned very quickly that you can't just pick up the phone and call Exxon. So not that I expected that, but in general, anybody that's in that top half of oil production is typically not accepting your calls. So if I want to go buy a bigger deal, how do I do it? Well, I'm going to put myself in front of every single person in the oil industry and be loud and try and gain as much traction as I can, getting to know these people. You also think, I'm 32 years old. The average age in oil and gas is probably in mid 60s, early 60s. So I'm in a different age bracket, different understanding of that space. Like I've always been okay with bridging the gap with age, but it's that traditional Texas man, oil man. I mean, that's what it is. And,
Yep.
and I'm not, I'm a young buck in their eyes. So I have to win them over in different ways. And that's where I'm spending the money to do.
All right. Biggest expense, biggest downside risk, and then exit plan is like to sell to Exxon. Would that be like the goal?
My biggest expense with what?
The oil and gas stuff. So like month over month, you're like, hey, this is just the nut I have to crack, and it's a part of it.
I would say actually your biggest expense is unrealized. And I'll tell you why. Every single well you buy has a decline, right? And at the end of that life cycle, if you can't keep that well online, the Railroad Commission of Texas gives you a finite amount of time to go plug that well. So if you can imagine, when you're buying a well, and when I say plug, I'm referring to literally pour concrete down it. And that's what you have to do. And I mean, I've got 8 wells right now that are 14,500 feet deep and 5,000 feet horizontally. So if you can imagine almost 20,000 feet of well depth, over 4 miles of well in the ground. And if I am not able to produce out of those wells, after a few years, they're going to start asking me to plug it. And each one of those wells is about 120 to 140 grand to plug. So the kick in the balls with this business is if things don't work and you have a problem, like a casing leak or something dramatic with the well, you have to spend more money to remedy it. So it's almost like having your house burned down and then code enforcement calls you up and say, hey, got to get that scooped off of there. Like it's a pretty shitty luck of the draw. You mitigate that. I mean, you definitely do your correct testing and evaluations and look at, I'll give you an example. Those 8 gas wells, the deep ones, we looked at the local composition of gases nearby to see if they were having on the increased CO2 levels. So every gas well, whenever you produce from it, will have a breakdown of different types of gases that come out of the ground. And with this one, it was like 9% CO2. Well, that's a damaging corrosive agent down there. So we wanted to look at other wells nearby and see how they were lasting, see if they were getting plugged, because we want to evaluate how long it'll take before we have to plug it. There's a multitude of reasons why wells go down too. They can load up, for example. They can start getting too much water coming out of the formation, which fills up the production tubing, fills up the casing, and basically the water as it loads up. If you can imagine, a well is 15,000 feet deep. If you get 7,000 or 8,000 feet of water, that's water pressure holding down against your gases trying to come up. So eventually your production will cease just based on the fact there's too much water in the well. There's a lot of different things that play metrics. People that try to say oil and gas is easy are full of shit, to be honest with you. It's really
Alex, question. So
Yeah.
for me, real estate person, and the other real estate people watching, like equating this to a fix and flip, right? We buy a property, money starts going out, we spend more money to fix it up, we've got holding costs, right? And then 4 to 6 months later, we sell it, money comes back in. What's the life cycle of one of these wells, or how do you get revenue back into the company? Like, what does that even look like for a business like yours?
So I would say the way we're buying with PDP is more equivalent to like a rental property, in the sense that we're buying an existing house or well. and we're cash flowing it, and we're because it's producing every month. Typically, we try to buy majority active production. The other kicker is whenever you buy a package of wells, it's almost like going and buying 100 rentals. You're going to get 70 good ones and 30 crap. So the same thing applies to oil and gas, but you have that caveat in the back of your head. You're like, crap, I may have to plug.
Which one of these is shit?
Yeah, which one's bad and which one's going to cost me the most. So when you do your performance, there's a lot of math into it, because you're not only performing on how the production is going to go, but also the price points of the market at the time, if oil and gas is going up or down. There's just a lot of variables here. But in general, going back to the original question, I would say it's more equated to a rental, and how you truly make money is upkick on the production. So, for example, if I go in and buy a package of wells that have been producing for 30 years and they're consistently producing, I can kind of predict how that reservoir is looking based on our analytics and things we've dived into. And then I see if I can improve it. So a lot of guys will go drill a well, they'll make their money, and then they just let it kind of tick along. They don't do any maintenance to it. They're not kind of keeping it alive. And if you can imagine, you have a well bore, and then in the middle, you have what's called production tubing. That production tubing is only 2.5 inch, 3 inch in diameter. And just like your heart gets clogged up, you get clogged arteries over time, and cholesterol kind of shrinks that hole. Well, all of the nasty stuff that comes out with oil ends up going inside that production tubing and starts kind of closing that hole up. So just a basic remedy is cleaning out that production tubing, getting rid of all that particles and matter that have built up in there over time. You get paraffin, you get all sorts of different things building up in the well that constricts it, almost like your heart. So us going in, we can actually make a production upkick just by servicing the wells properly and spending that initial capex and getting the well back to life. That's part of it. The other alternative too is, you can bring in other people. So if I had a deal that was sizable enough and I wanted to recoup some capital quick, I could sell off what's called non-op working interest, basically allowing them to partake in the portfolio with me on a percentage basis. I can sell them 0.5% or percent, whatever it may be, based on a market value, and then that brings cash back in. It doesn't necessarily make me a profit per se, but it's recouping capital when needed.
What's the biggest thing that you've implemented in this business that you learned in the flipping business?
Definitely lead generation. I mean, I was really good at generating leads at a cheap price. One of the differences is, though, this type of lead is finite. There's only 15,000 oil and gas operators in Texas. So if you can imagine, your list is only 15,000. Those are the only people I'm really reaching out to, because they're the most readily available. Now, I could go buy, like I was speaking of, non-operated working interest, but it's not so readily available online as much of who owns that. A lot of it can be just buried in recorded documents and things. So if I wanted to go on that scavenger hunt, I could pull that out. But the most readily available thing is to call operators. Now, with 15,000 people, you got to get pretty creative on how you're reaching out to them. You got to be pretty accurate too. I mean, I spent a lot of money and time making sure we're calling the right people, just scrubbing lists and making sure we're skip tracing on multiple different people. I see it right now in the market already. You were talking about making the leap over to oil and gas. I think there's a bit of a false message being delivered about oil and gas. I think it's actually kind of what not to speak badly, but the sub-2 community has the same problem, in my opinion, because the sub-2 community is full of people that are, 9-to-5ers that are trying to break into business, right? And the downfall with that is they're kind of taking a small piece of knowledge about it. Like, they're grabbing a little bit of how the deal works, and then they're running with it. Instead of how I learned about real estate, I went through the progression, the stumbles, the falls, the up and down. I kind of went through that whole course of business. Whereas now, that kind of community, they're really bullish about doing the deals, but not necessarily worrying about learning all the intricacies behind the problems that could occur. And I think that's happening in the oil and gas space already, where people are kind of talking about it as if it's an easy slam dunk thing. Guys are going in, spending money, trying to buy oil deals, but not knowing what the fuck they're doing, and then ending up in trouble. Because you can just go, I can say, okay, hey, this oil operator's, doing 1,000 barrels a month. Okay, cool. Let's multiply that by $90 a barrel and subtract off some expenses. That's what I should, pay a multiple on. But that's not the truth. There's so many more things that come into oil and gas. And it's almost like giving somebody enough information to hang themselves with. And I'm kind of worried about the space turning into that, because I have been hearing more and more different people trying to who buys oil leases? I'm like, well, are they even bonded operators? Because you have to be a bonded oil and gas operator in Texas in order to actually operate these wells. You could go use a contract operator, which means that somebody else would kind of go in place of that. Yeah. But then you're reliant on that person doing right by you. You're reliant on them correctly maintaining your wells. You're reliant on them not over billing you, because they would be in charge of all the transactions. It's like having a property manager, but giving them all your eggs. It's a little scary. I wouldn't want to do it personally. We looked at that. That was actually one of the things I looked at. I said, okay, do I want to be an operator or not? Do I want to use a contract operator, or do I want to become an operator myself? And being the fact that I've tried property management stuff in the past, I knew I didn't want to go down that road of having others manage my assets, especially at this price point.
It's interesting what you said about the social media piece. I think you see it a ton in our space because we're so involved in real estate. So there's a lot of sharing of knowledge, and then it makes it easier than what it is. I get a little trickles of the oil and gas stuff too. Do you see that same message? It sounds like it is, right? Because you're getting some of that, hey, who wants to buy this or that? Is that being pushed out in that industry too, or not as much yet?
It started, but I think like I said, it's a good space. Don't get me wrong. But if you can imagine, I obviously knew enough in real estate to be making the level of income I was in that space, consistently for many years. So if I'm struggling and spent all this money to kind of get my foothold and I'm still losing money, it's probably not as easy as other people are saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Higher barrier to entry.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Jason. There's got to be a pretty high barrier to entry to even enter the game.
Well, I'm not hopping on here bragging about making $10 million this year. I'm telling you, I'm losing money every month because I'm an honest guy. I'm not going to lie. And part of my loss, like I said, is from me trying to scale faster by exposing ourselves to more things, branding really well, getting our name out there. So those costs probably could have been, reduced. But in general, I genuinely believe that our core costs, just like subscription wise, like I'm spending $160,000, $170,000 a year in monthly subscriptions right now between my Inverus package. That's how we kind of dive in, do some forecasting. So I have what's called drilling info that gives me all the production data and stuff. We have Aries, which is another economic forecasting model. We use PAC for our production or accounting. We have all these different subscriptions and stuff. And I'm just like, I had a wholesaler kid recently hit me up, and he'd been wholesale for like a year. And he asked me, he's like, hey, what about getting oil and gas? I said, honestly, I wouldn't want to empower you with enough knowledge to lose what you built, because I genuinely believe that he's not going to have the fiscal capital to get this rolling. So I don't want to set him up for failure by kind of sprinkling, hey, here's some hope and dreams. And oh shit, you just burned all your money. Now you're back to square one.
It sounds like you said there's an extra zero on the back end on the exit, but that zero also applies to your expenses in the front end of everything that you're spending too. It sounds like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm buying softwares that large, massive oil companies pay for, and I pay a premium based on the fact that they can afford it. I mean, it's crazy how much they charge per user and everything else, because they're used to dealing with giant companies that are willing to pay for it. It sucks being the small guy in this space. Like I said, I went from a champ in real estate to a chump in oil, but I mean, it kind of goes back to that. Hey, I want to be the dumbest man in the smartest room. And I kind of feel like I'm there right now, because I know about business, but these guys sure do know oil. So,
What does your team look like now on that oil space? And do you have any real estate company running?
yeah, no, actually, it's small. It's really small. So, what we're doing right now is I have my full-time petroleum engineer in house, so he's here. But we outsourced like our geology stuff, certain advising that we have done as far as like recomplete projects, things like that. We're using third parties because when you're a smaller company, you have to be careful of having too much staff. It's easy to go really heavy on payroll, but then you're not necessarily optimizing them. Like having a full-time geologist sounds great, but at the same point, it's like, okay, I'm paying $150,000 a year to have a guy that doesn't really have anything to drill right now. So it's kind of pointless. Same as a landman, we outsource that. I have multiple people outsourced. I have my EA, and then everybody else is in the field. So we have kind of like a field ops guy, and then we have pumpers who actually work on the wells every single day. So we have a team of pumpers they're kind of like property managers that show up every day and look at the well.
Are those the roughnecks?
No, roughnecks on the drilling rig. That's the guys that throw the chain around and
yeah,
they're the ones
Whenever I
getting
hear oil and gas, that's what I imagine.
Yeah, now these guys are just literally showing up to the field. It's already a active lease with wells and tank batteries on it. So all they do is they go measure the tank, see where the levels are of water, see where oil is, and they record it for me. And they go check the timers and make sure the wells aren't pumping off too hard. It's just daily kind of like inspections, basically. Those are the main drivers of how we know things are processing, right? You can imagine I'm in Florida, Tampa. My wells are just outside of Houston, just outside of Austin, like they're really far away. So I have a local guy at each place that goes around and literally inspects the wells, makes sure they're fine, checks the pressures, things like that. So very small team right now, but it's okay though, because to be honest with you, like we don't need a large team at this level. And I've seen, speaking to enough people now, I mean, there's guys that are running, 500 or 1,000 wells with a 4-person office team. You don't need a ton of people. It's more of who you have. Like my engineer now has done drilling, done a bit of fracking. He knows like a good balance of things. So he's allowed me to kind of learn different facets of the space, but also I'm only having to pay one person versus paying 3 or 4 because he knows different intricacies of the space.
Dino, you got any questions? I haven't heard from you in like 15 minutes.
I know. I asked. So Alex and I just came back from an event, and we spoke for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
We talked for about 3 hours. So I wanted to save the good questions coming from you guys. I'm just sitting here learning some new stuff, some questions I didn't ask. You always got good questions to ask, Stratton. Alex, I'm curious. Maybe we'll wrap it up with this. Help us understand how this business plan comes together. I know you're getting started. You're pouring fuel on the fire, literally, to speed this up. I'm trying to relate it to rentals. So maybe I'm buying some rentals that are appreciating. They're not cash flowing right away, something like that. All right. So how do I figure out help me understand how you take this model you have right now and how you turn it in to that bigger business that is cash flowing? Like how do you make those wells cash flow essentially?
Yeah, I mean, we're buying more. So we actually would have been cash flowing positively. I had a bad deal go bad, and I explained to you part of it. But basically, I had a deal under contract that would have put us at positive cash flow. Spent over 30 days on it, $50,000 in due diligence. I ended up trying to bring in different capital than I typically would use, and they ended up showing it around a little too much, and I ended up getting a cancellation of contract, and all of a sudden they had another buyer. So I kind of got
Goddamn.
stuck on a deal, which is annoying because I underwrote that thing at $67 a barrel and oil's at 92 today, I think 91. So it's already jumped up, you know, cash flow wise. It would probably be making about 70,000 net a month right now, that deal. But 65, 70, something like that. But we probably plan to pick up something pretty quick. By the end of this year, my goal by the end of the year is to be positive cash flowing. So we're in final stages of rolling out our offers. We're going to actually be sending out a lot of offers pretty soon, kind of casting a wide net to see what we can pick up. As far as like scaling higher and higher and higher, it'll probably come in a little bit later because we're going to acquire. My goal next year is to buy probably a $15 or $20 million portfolio, just buy a big packet. I want to buy out a whole company. So then we're basically buying companies to expand faster. So instead of just kind of going slow with it, you know, we can go drill, don't get me wrong, but drilling is also risk. Anybody that tells you drilling is not risky is bullshit. And they're probably selling you some ownership into it. Like drilling in general is risky. It's a law of averages play, in my opinion. Like if they're trying to drill like one well, not that I've drilled anything, but I kind of have a good understanding of it now. They're trying to drill like one well, scary. If they're expecting to have a couple of dry holes out of like 5 or 10 drills, then I'd probably be more interested in getting into it. But the scaling is going to come from acquiring and also buying at the right time. If you can imagine, oil is ebb and flows, right? Like oil prices go up, oil prices go down. I mean, last year in July, oil was at 130. Then it went all the way down to 67 at the beginning of this year, 60 or 60 maybe. I don't know, 50s. I don't know how low it got. I can't remember. But it's all about when you buy, what you buy, and how you plan to increase that production. That's the real thing. It's going to be widgets. I think once we buy a sizable deal, we'll really have a better understanding of it. I can't remember who said it, but I'm going off of my belief that I know how to build a business properly. I'm not going off the belief that I know what the fuck I'm doing right now. That's the truth. Like I know enough. I know 1,000 times more than the average person about oil. But when it comes to how I'm going to scale to $1 billion, I don't think any billionaire can ever tell you that he knew why it scaled to it. It just kind of happens organically as you grow and as you take on bigger things. I have a very high ability to take on risk. I can take on risk all day long. I don't care. I'll roll the dice. Take me to zero. I don't give a fuck. I'll do it again. That's just always been my mentality, you know. And like walking away from great income and fix and flip. I mean, it actually didn't start sucking until probably summer this year, where I was like still working, and I'm like, shit. Like I gotta work. I gotta work. Like I can't go on yacht days 5 days a week. I can't do all the dumb stuff I used to do. There's no PJs going on right now, you know. And it's not because like I can't afford it. It's just when you're making nothing, and you were making. I mean, I'm making some money. Don't get me wrong. Like I have some.
But you ain't but you're not.
Yeah,
hand over fist, not doing anything.
Yeah, I'm not rolling in the dough and throwing around money anymore because I need to be sensible. I mean, I'm okay with going to zero. I don't plan on going to zero, but in general, the higher risk is a delicate thing because some people can take it too far to the point where they just kind of self-destruct, right? They're like, oh shit, I'm going to roll the dice on everything. I think I've gotten to the point now where I know where I can roll the dice and where not to, and how to keep that balance there. Yeah, risk is crazy. I mean, I've gotten told some interesting things like, why the hell did you do that? You're crazy. You're really good at that. But then again, you know, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward has always been a truthful thing if it works, right? It's all about if it works. And we'll see. I mean, if I fuck up, hey, at least I learned about oil.
There you go. I mean, either way, really, bro, when you're scaling, if you're going into development, you're still doing massive deals that aren't going to make you any money right away. Right? Like you're still going for big things. So you're going to outlay a bunch of cash and go for a significantly larger outcome than you were in the flipping space.
Correct. Yeah.
I got 3 questions and I promise I'm done. Is the sales process slow in oil and gas?
Yes. Very. And expensive. title opinions are one thing that people don't talk about, but like my last one cost me like 35,000. That's like whenever you sell a piece of real estate, you have a title insurance. But with oil and gas, the attorneys will dive into your paperwork and past leases and things like that, and trace them all the way back. And it's very expensive. I mean, I paid 35,000 on the last one. That's just one random thing, but the time of it, you got to like. I'll give you an example. I have 8 boxes, or I'm sorry, I have 8 wells that we bought, and I have 29 boxes of information about those wells. So if you can imagine due diligence wise going through all that stuff, for 8 wells, I have 29 boxes.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right. And then short answer, are you gonna, for this $15 million acquisition, are you going straight like PE model where you're going to go raise like a ton of money and give up equity, or you're just going to go straight debt?
Debt.
Okay.
Yeah. My goal is always the same thing with this. I'm buying with debt. And if I decide to exit out of stuff or like reduce my ownership stake, I'll probably end up selling non-op positions, but I'll still retain majority ownership. So I'm doing it kind of like a reverse syndication. We're buying it with debt, and then we're cashing out the debt with the non-op position.
Okay, that's what you're saying.
Yep. Is that all of it?
Did you have another one? I heard 2 questions.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Jason, any last questions for you?
No, man, it's been good education. Appreciate the insight on the oil and gas business. I love people betting on themselves and shooting for the fucking stars, dude. So I am 100% supporter of that type of stuff. I think people questioned all of us here at one point in our lives, and I think we're driven by a little bit of that, man. So I am for one in your corner, Alex. I'll be rooting for you, buddy.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had my popcorn taken and stuff. We got super technical. I like to get into the technical stuff of the business. So we spoke for 3 hours, and I know we could have talked for another 5. But yeah, exactly. But did want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Guys, again, if you're listening to this, you can find us on YouTube. If you do, make sure to leave us a like and a subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And man, thanks so much for coming on, Alex. It's been a pleasure to have you. Until next time. Peace.
And don't miss our meetup tonight.
Don't miss the meetup, Central California Real Estate Investing Group, Central California. You guys can check us out on Facebook as well there.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Catch you later.